It all started 2 years ago today when I was convinced I was having a heart attack. Just the chest pain hasn't gone away. My dad had one at my age. I think my anxiety and the speculation of what it could be is freaking me out, so I have to go alone right now. It's 3:56 on a Friday. Praying I'm okay. Going to the ER. Finally, the doctor walked in with a deeply concerning look on his face. He asked me my age and sat there with a blank stare for a long time, longer than any patient would ever prefer. He finally spoke up and asked, "Is there any reason you would be under a lot of stress right now?" Every pastor would chuckle at such a question, and I gave him a few reasons. 1, I planted a church 23. At night, I'm overwhelmed with anxiety thinking, how are we gonna pull this off? 10 out of 10 would not be recommended for anybody else. Another is we were entering our 6th year of trying to reach critical mass. I started to pour concrete in the mornings, and I made YouTube videos at night just to make my financial ends meet. COVID kicked us out of our venue and forced us to become a Sunday night church. We lost key families in 2020. We lost our biggest givers in 2020. Some argued I did not talk enough about politics, while others argued I addressed it way too much. And my wife suffered a miscarriage earlier that year, and little did I know the next one was just around the corner.
Doctor. We had our first ultrasound yesterday, and from what I could tell, they couldn't find the baby, so.
After discovering it was not a heart attack at all, it was just anxiety, I began a journey. Began to learn from leaders like Edward Friedman that we need to become a non-anxious presence, and I can't lie, I had no idea how to do that. After throwing a pity party, I decided to get to work. Although it didn't seem like a reality, that vision of becoming a non-anxious presence, like the man in Psalm 112, just captured my heart. And from what I've learned in ministry and life, I've kind of have to start at the head, get some information there, learn about my heart, and then work with my hands. And that's essentially the process I found myself in creating this book. And so here it is. In section 1, I just talk about the pastor's predicament, the political polarization we are facing, and the enemies of hope being time, chance, and death, and how do you pastor in the midst of that. But I think most people have found the greatest value in sections 2 and 3. Section 2 is all about your identity as a pastor. In a world that tells you to chase greatness, I think the call is to choose goodness. In a world that wants you to carry the weight on your own shoulders, I think God is calling pastors to care and wait for God to do what only He can do. We don't have to be motivational speakers. What we're called to be is maturational leaders, and there's a process to bring people towards maturity. And that's the last section. How do we lead people towards maturity? How do we lead ourselves towards maturity? And I think we need to implement a digital way of life. How we interact with our phones and the media. We need to implement a devotional way of life. Daily scripture reading, but also weekly Sabbath rest for the sake of our soul and to remember the grace of God. And imagine if we began to implement a dinner way of life, where fasting became common again, and feasting with our neighbors was our primary way of sharing the gospel and sharing the love of God. I really pray that you find benefit from this, and that you too can start to become a person of peace in a world at war. Grace and peace, my friend.